All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to Lean In Olympia. I'm very excited you're here today. My name is Corey Passons and I'm here with Interfaith Works. I'm a program manager for interfaith relations with Interfaith Works. We are a coalition of 30 plus diverse faith and spiritual communities. We are also the area's largest provider of social services for vulnerable adults experiencing homelessness. This is a live bi-weekly podcast coming to you from Olympia, Washington that features conversations at the crossroads of humanity, justice, and belief. And if you want to check out past episodes or stay up to date with what we're doing at Interfaith Works, please check us out on our website at interfaith-works.org or check out the Interfaith Works Facebook page and YouTube channel. And we are on Spotify, so you can subscribe and just stay up to date with what we're doing on Lean In Olympia and across the org. So my guest today is Jay Banks. Jay is the Executive Director of Pizza Klatch. Thanks for being here today.
Yeah, glad to be here. Glad to talk about Pizza Klatch and all that good stuff.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much for making time to be here today. I'll do a brief little intro bio, and then you can tell me what I got right or not quite.
Yeah.
Jay is the Executive Director of Pizza Klatch. I learned just before we came on that I thought you'd moved here in 2020, but you moved here in 2018.
Yes, I did.
And so that's a new-ish to the Olympia and Pacific Northwest region. And we can talk about that from the DC area.
Yes.
And they are the Executive Director of Pizza Klatch. By the way, the website for Pizza Klatch is pizza, as you spell it, and then KLATHC.org. And we'll post that too in the link to this episode. So check it out. It's a great website. Tons of resources there, especially for folks who want to learn about the organization or the cultures in which these youth are versed, in which is really an emerging. It's a culture that's across all youth these days, and so great resources there to learn. Prior to Pizza Klatch, Jay started a trans support and education group during their time at George Mason University, which is in where?
Fairfax, Virginia.
Okay, in Fairfax. And was influential in the university adopting their gender-neutral housing policy. They also have their master's in early childhood education and work to implement a Black Lives Matter curriculum in their classroom while focusing on being trans and queer affirming. Jay is passionate about intersectionality, which is a term that I want to come back to a little later in the conversation, and being a source of positive representation for queer youth of color. They also love traveling to new places and binge watching reality TV shows. And if there's bonus time, we can explore what shows those are, but we'll just leave that for now.
Cool.
And so, yeah, that's
me.
That's you. Great. Yeah. So you did move here in 2020, but where did you grow up? What's your what origins?
Yeah, so I grew up in Virginia mostly. I was born in Alexandria, Virginia, and then we moved down south to where the rest of my family lived, so like the bottom of Virginia, very close to North Carolina.
Okay.
And then I went to college in Fairfax, Virginia, and just kept ticking my way up until I lived and worked in DC as a elementary school teacher for a few years. Yeah. So yeah, that's where I'm from. Very southern, southern to my core. The extreme politeness and all of that. That is that is me, and that's where most of my family still lives.
Yeah. So when you were working in DC as in the elementary school level, and how long was that period of time?
That was about 3 years. 4 years. It's a little confusing because I was getting my master's and teaching at the same time. So yeah, I've taught from pre-K to second grade.
Yeah.
And then it was mostly in charter schools in DC, which is a interesting place to work in. All schools, I think, come with their like amazing qualities and they're not so amazing qualities, and charter schools are like no exception. But it was interesting to kind of work in an area, because I worked in Southeast DC, which DC used to be more, they called it Chocolate City. It was kind of a place where like Black folks really lived and thrived, and that's changed over the years. And so a lot of the community is kind of relegated to Southeast DC. And that's where I worked for most of my time as a teacher. And so schools that were 100% Black and came with a lot of struggles. So I found a lot of positivity and being around at my identity group and really focusing on things like Black Lives Matters and like talking to my second graders about their history and all of that. But then also the struggle of like working in schools that are working for profit. And, you know, each student is counted so that they can get their money, and you put a lot of effort on just like pushing kids in school, but not providing a lot of that emotional support that they need, because I had a lot of students who had families who were struggling, and where second graders were becoming caretakers and things like that. So eventually I was like, I don't know if I can do this work in this space specifically.
Well, let's earmark that, because when we come to Pizza Klatch later, because all the work, as far as I can tell, is in public schools. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe we can explore that a little bit when we get to the organization.
Yeah.
What would you say? Can you cite maybe one biggest difference, like Southern culture to Pacific Northwest?
Sweet tea.
Sweet tea.
That is the biggest thing. When I moved here, I went to a restaurant. I can't remember which one it was, and I asked for tea. Because I can just say, "Can I get like an iced tea?" And it's a sweet tea.
Okay.
It's got sugar in it. Maybe it's got a lemon. Not here.
Not here. Okay.
It's all unsweetened.
All unsweetened.
The only place I could go to find sweet tea was McDonald's. And I was like, I don't want to have to come to McDonald's.
Would not have expected that. No,
Yeah.
I really don't know. I wouldn't have known what a sweet tea like.
Right? Yeah,
Okay.
it was baffling. And so I would come to work and I'd complain about it. And my boss at the time, one day, go check the fridge. And they just bought me a bottle of sweet tea.
That's very nice.
So that was my thing. I was like, oh my gosh, why is there no sweet tea in Olympia? That doesn't make sense.
That's very nice. So when you were growing up in Virginia, who were some of the people who were the most influential for you, or the biggest people in your lives?
I spent a lot of time with my family, but my kind of place away from that was being at school. And I was like a huge nerd. I still am a huge nerd, but in different ways. But I kind of gravitated towards marching band, and I specifically did color guard. So it was a lot of like flag spinning, don't say twirling. Everyone gets upset. And things like that. And I think at the time, because I thought about it a little bit, there was one person who felt important in like a very interesting way, because high school was where I was really coming into like my identity as like a queer person and a trans person eventually. And so I had one color guard coach, and oh my gosh, this is so long ago, and I'm like, am I forgetting his name? His name was Mike. And he was very like himself. He was loud. He liked to joke and all these kind of things. And I think he definitely saw that I was hidden. And I was very kind of tightly held in and of myself. And so there was a lot of playful like teasing and just trying to bring me out of my shell, especially in the sport of like performing and doing color guard and stuff like that. So I definitely think he was someone who kind of made me open up my mind to who I was inside, and like being accepting of myself, because I think I did shortly after spending a season of marching band with him. I came out to some of my friends, came out to him, and he was like, I always knew kind of thing. And I'm like, well, why didn't you tell me? Come on, man. But was also just like, you know, you're amazing. Love you however you are. Things like that. So that was definitely an important person for me growing up, just to kind of see somebody who was like, I'm myself, however that is. And like, you can be that too.
Wow. What a powerful story. I mean, I think that just from what I know about Pizza Klatch, and I haven't attended a Klatch, but just from what I've talked to people who have and worked in the organization, and just that sense of like being who you are, you know, and like that person not only modeled that for you, but feels like they gave you permission.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Definitely. And I did become the captain of the color guard
at
one point.
Okay, great.
So I give that to him. He didn't end up sticking around for whatever reason. I was in high school, so they don't tell you everything.
Yeah,
But yeah, that was very,
wow, what
very
a legacy.
Much
Yeah. Who are some of your mentors or inspirations, even from that time or ongoing?
Yeah. So I think we talked about it a little bit before, but I have a complicated relationship with mentors. I feel like I've gone into a lot of spaces where I feel pretty positive about things. I'll give my teaching kind of training as an example, but we were doing a residency program where you work for a full year as a teacher with a mentor teacher,
Okay.
While you're also getting your master's
Oh,
in
okay.
teaching. So you're learning the concepts and applying it directly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's for me, I was like, that's really great to have that whole year, because eventually you take over the classroom by the end of the year.
Wow. Yeah.
And rather than some programs where they throw you in for like a semester and then they're like, now you have to be a teacher. And so the person I worked with at the beginning taught me a lot and just really got me comfortable with what it was to work with. I was working with first graders at the time, and how to respond appropriately, how to just teach them concepts and really break it down and to make it fun. We did plays, we made stores, we had them do job interviews and learn all that kind of stuff.
Sounds great.
But eventually, as that kind of support was petering off as it was supposed to, that person also just tuned out completely. And so I was like, oh, what's happening here? That energy's not the same. And there were a lot of other reasons why. But for me, that kind of made it where I was like, I don't know if I can see you as a mentor anymore. But I also want to obtain these skills because I would like to feel that I've reached whatever goal. So it made me work harder to have that person kind of like turn away. And then it turned into, I feel like spite's a hard word, but I like using it because my motivation was like, I'm feeling a little spiteful, so I'm gonna get good. I'm gonna do better. I'm gonna learn as much as I can, and I'm gonna take it with me because like my goal is to be the best teacher I can be with what I have. And I don't have this person to rely on to teach me that anymore. So I'm just gonna like do it myself.
Yeah.
And so that's been a theme for me when I get into those spaces. And I don't know what it is. I think there's probably a lot of factors that lead to that. It might be that those folks are people that I can't necessarily identify with, and they can't identify with me. And so that always makes the relationship a little weird at some point. But for me, it's like more of a motivator to be like, okay, I have to figure out how to do this on my own. And how do I do that?
Yeah, well, I mean, that mentor relationship, like something came of it that it was beneficial for you. And it feels like relating with youth, there might not every time be like a sense of, reciprocity or connection, but maybe you can just think something positive could be happening here, like below maybe the need to have that relationship look on a surface level the way you might want it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that it's also just kind of I feel for me, it's taught me to really build up my confidence in myself and not so much rely on it coming from other people, which is a hard thing to balance because I think we should be getting acceptance and confidence and like love and care from other people. Like that should be poured into all of our buckets for sure. But there is something about really building up how you feel about yourself. It's something I struggle with all the time, every single day. But having that reminder of like those times where I was like I felt like I was relying too heavily on someone else, to be like, remember, you can like build yourself up too. And you have to like keep going back to that. You have to keep trying, because it's all just practice in the end. Yeah.
One of the words that I'll read here in a little bit from the mission statement of Pizza Klatch is the word resilience. It feels like I'm hearing some of that.
Yeah.
I'm hearing your story about mentors.
Yeah. I've had a rough life, good life, rough, and I've had a lot of opportunity to build up resilience. So it is definitely like one of those things that I really identify with in our mission, because we're stepping into a youth's life. They've already gone through a lot of stuff. So we're there to help them to build up whatever resiliency they already have or have had to obtain.
Yeah. Well, before we pivot into Pizza Klatch too, you and I we talked a little bit last week, and I mentioned that, in my angle in my episodes in Lean and Olympia, I focus on, spirituality, but I talked with you about that term being, for me, I want to offer people the wide space of spirituality being a source, a way that they make meaning in their lives, the way that they understand and identify meaning in life. And meaning is abstract, spirituality is abstract, but the through line is that there's a sense of purpose that a person resonates with at an individual level. So we talked about that, and I just was curious, given that little build up there, what is the source of meaning for you? In either in your work, if you like to answer that way, or just in your life, or has the two overlap?
I don't think they've overlapped yet, but they're kind of on the edge, which is great. I would love the like singularity of my of my kind of heart work that I do with PK and all the other stuff, and then my personal kind of like life work, which involves a lot of kind of art and creativity. But I think that there are spaces for them to come together in the terms of like thinking about how representation is really important to me. Like my role in being a teacher was to like be a Black teacher, and at that time it wasn't I wasn't really open about my sexual or gender identity, because that's complicated. But just being another person that they can see and be like, that could be a future for me. Just that's one possibility.
Just by seeing you.
Just by seeing me, by me being in that space, which felt the same for Pizza Klatch, and coming here. And it's my heart work because it's just so deep in who I am as a person. I see myself in the youth or possibilities, and I think that's what a lot of people feel when they come to that organization. But then like for my personal life, I think it's kind of the same, because I don't really call myself an artist. I'm struggling with that. But I used to perform. I used to do drag and burlesque before the pandemic shut things down. And so during that time, I was like, well, let me figure out another way to be creative, which doodling and stuff had always been a thing. And so I picked up oil pastels and oil paints, and now I'm doing like pixel art and stuff like that. So just being able to really express myself, because a lot of my art is like faces, and they're usually folks that I could probably see in my family or things like that, or maybe they're kind of funky colors and weird like that. So just being able to, I think I'm trying to figure out how to bring that all together, like the representation and just the being able to express yourself freely, I feel like is kind of what is really integral to like how I navigate through life, through work, and through kind of the things that are just hobbies right now. That just, this is who I am.
Yeah. I had another, question about, during the pandemic, all of us have been brought to, emotional, spiritual, like limits of our reserves brought down. And I think a lot of us have been tasked with asking, like, what is it that really restores me? Or what is it that like makes me feel like I can do this thing or engage this and feel like I'm getting some life or energy back, where so many of the typical places that we used to just experience that from, that we might not have even appreciated as deeply as we might now, So is there something that is art that for you, that place of restoring, or is there something else that you do to help you build up your emotional reserves as a organizational leader? And
it's definitely the art. And that's a more recent thing, because I think now I'm turning to it, in those times. The funny thing about pixel art is you're just placing a square at a time, and it's a digital medium, and that kind of that kind of thing of just like one pixel at a time, and then you get to create kind of whatever image, has been so like freeing for me recently, in a time that I feel like I'm really stressed out. I'm like, okay, well, I can just like make a thing. And the other art forms are like that too. I used to dance a lot, and like I would just go to a dance studio when it was the before times, and just kind of dance for like an hour or so, just to get a release. There's something about just like, I can just kind of use my body in a way, and if not that, then I can like express an idea with my brain, and tune out anything else, just kind of being in the zone.
How long does a pixel piece take you?
Depends.
Okay.
Depends on the size.
That feels like, you started to describe that. I was like, oh, okay,
I did a pretty large piece that could fit like the background of a computer. It's still not done, but that probably took me overall like 3-4 days. And it's still not done.
Okay. Yeah, I've never seen it happen, but then when you started to describe exactly what it is, like, oh, those are little. Those are little.
Just I did a challenge. It was like a 30-day challenge, but I did it in a few weeks because it was from years ago, where you just make black and white like images in 16 by 16, so super small
Oh, 16 by pixel. Okay, yeah.
16 by 16 pixels. And then the last ones were like 24, I think, by 24. And that took me maybe 2 weeks to complete. And it was extremely difficult because you could only use like black and white.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, but it also was like fun. It taught me a lot about how to actually do the art. But yeah, even 16 by 16 over time, it's a lot of time.
That's a lot.
I don't know how people make games in that style completely, but I am curious.
Well, I'm heartened to hear that you have that source that's like known and named for you, that, you know, is a place where you can go during these times, because we're still moving through this, and we're still, you know, and we've talked about other, and we will talk about other factors and influences, and your work. I mean, you're working with youth and youth that are also like have a higher prevalence of they're struggling too, and so you're holding a lot. So I'm glad to hear that you've got those sources. And let's pivot then to Pizza Klatch as an org. I just really loved the mission and the vision statements, and I condensed the vision statement just a little bit, and then I want to read the mission statement, which is to foster resilience in LGBTQ plus youth, and create a safe and positive school experience through support, education, and empowerment. And then the mission statement, and this is probably half, or maybe like 2/3 of it. LGBTQ plus youth will be empowered to self-advocate, build community, develop confidence as they explore and develop their identities. School will be a positive and supportive space where LGBT plus youth are accepted and celebrated, free to learn without violence, harassment, discrimination, suicidal ideation, or self-harm. It's a beautiful vision, and when I finished reading it, I realized that like this vision statement names some realities. Yeah. You know, at the end it says free to learn without violence, harassment, discrimination, suicidal ideation, or self-harm. Yeah. There's a reason why y'all had to name that. And so I just kind of like that's where maybe we should start, is if you could just describe maybe the world of you know, of the youth that you're serving, and why a vision statement like this needed to do that. Yeah.
Well, I think a good way to kind of describe it is like the origin story of Pizza Klatch, which Pizza Klatch has been around for 15 years. So a very long time in this area, and we've had a lot of growth in the past year since I've come on board. But it started because there was a slew of suicides, teen suicides, in the area. And some very concerned therapists and other like mental health advocates in the area were like, we have to do something about it, because it was directly tied to their identities, and there was a lot of LGBTQ youth being lost. And so they talked with North Thurston High School and got some funding from the Pride Foundation to start up Pizza Klatch, which it wasn't called that at first. And it was happening directly after school, which meant that got shut down. And some of those students who were involved got sent to conversion therapy, and various things like that. So that kind of just shows the students were already having a hard time, which was leading to them killing themselves, probably mostly from families not accepting them, or just like not being able to access resources to make that a bearable situation. And then after the fact, when a space does show up, you have to ask for permission to stay after school. You have to explain where you're going, which then leads to the sending folks to conversion therapy, which is usually a practice that is very violent and doesn't actually help or convert anybody, and can lead to more suicides. So all of that together, working with the schools, we were able to take Pizza Klatch and have it during school, so that students don't have to say where they're going, and they can have access to resources and people who have maybe had similar lives to them. And I would say that now those same things are still happening for students. We still have youth who are not being accepted by their family. We still have youth who don't have access to resources to support their needs, whether that's mental health, whether that's gender-affirming items. There is a lot of bullying and harassment happening in schools, and it does feel like there's been an uptick just because of the separation that they've all had from each other. And and they're still having a rough time, and they're very aware of like what's going on, not so much in Washington, but in other states where there are laws being talked about or put on ballots to make it so that folks can't learn about what it's like to be in the LGBTQ plus community. They can't hear that their teachers maybe also identify within that, and they're very aware. They know they are up to date, and it is painful to see that. So that's the reality for youth. It's just kind of like knowing that there are massive amounts of people who don't see you as human, don't accept you or how you live your life, and are determined to make it horrible and uncomfortable to live your life.
Yeah, we just talked about that Alabama law that just went into effect yesterday for finding as a felony offense for medical providers, supplying gender affirming healthcare to people. And then we noted 19 and under, and we were just like, this so
it's ridiculous.
Yeah, so to feel that for youth here, where there might not be a law that went into effect yesterday, but to feel that somewhere in my country, there is this going on, and what could be next here,
And the funny thing is that there's so many youth that I've met over the years who come from those states and then now live here. There's so many youth I've met who are directly from Florida and Texas and places like that, where they talk about like this place isn't great. They see that they're like, but it's so much better from where I came from. Especially just the fact that like a place like Pizza Klatch exists. A lot of the youth are like, wow. I would never think that this would happen, especially from where I come from, and there's a definite difference. But and I feel for some youth it ends up being kind of not a thought experiment at all. That's kind of what I'm thinking, but just it does concern them. I don't think they're necessarily worried about things changing in Washington, because I think Washington's pretty advanced on a lot of things, especially like we said, like youth can have informed consent at the age of 13, which is how we're able to operate. They don't have to tell their parents that they come to Pizza Klatch. If they go to a therapist and talk about things, they don't have to disclose that to their parents. But they do worry about people they know. Like they're more connected than probably we are as adults. They still know people who live in those states, and they are concerned for their friends who might have to go through those things, So it's more of like, I'm not worried about myself. I know I have a lot of resources here, but like my friend who lives in Texas and is like a young trans girl, she's like not doing well at all. And how do I, as a kid, a youth, how do I go and support my friend? Because I'm the only person that she has. So it's things like that, I think, that really happens to the youth in Washington specifically.
That's all. I mean, that's real too, holding that and holding the psychically, even across a social media platform or even like an internet relationship or something. That's all real stuff too. And the emotions it's all big, especially at that age. What is a Klatch? So it happens at noon. It's at noon. What does it look like?
Yeah, so it happens during the lunchtime. That depends depending on the school. Sometimes that's at like 10:30, which I'm like, that's so early.
Yeah, no, seriously.
Or it's later in the day. But 2 folks come in, so it's a staff member from Pizza Klatch and then a community volunteer.
Okay, always a staff.
Always a staff person. And we bring pizza. It comes from Pizza Time, both the Olympia and the Lacey location. Thank you to them. Pizza is very expensive.
Do they support with that?
They give us a good discount.
Great, yeah.
And they deliver it to most of the schools so that we don't have to run around. And we go in, and we're there for that whole lunch period. So some schools, that's one lunch, maybe it's 3 different lunches, in a confidential space, depending on what the school has available. And we are there to talk. And the process is students, come in, get your food. We do check-ins. So we ask for name, pronouns, your high and low of the week. But there's also the caveat of you don't have to speak in this space if you're not comfortable. You don't have to share your name or your pronouns or whatever. You could just be here. But we do like to know who you are. But we're also very, careful because a lot of folks are just kind of like, what is this?
Yeah.
Let me just peek on
as they kind of acclimate to it. Okay.
Exactly. And we're very open to that. We don't ask anybody to identify a certain way to come in, just that you be respectful and, attend to the group norms that are created by each group. So they're all very specific to that school and the folks that are there. And then that's it. We do that all throughout the school year.
Yeah. What have you seen how have you seen the students benefit from these spaces? What happens in the spaces that might distinguish it from in the cafeteria, having pizza there with their other classmates?
There's a chance to just get really honest about what's going on with you. I will say there are a lot of times where we're just hanging out, we're having fun, folks are talking about what they've watched, all that kind of stuff. But then there are times where you get one or two students who are like, I had a really hard week. And they get the space to talk about that if they want to. Sometimes they just want to say, my day sucked, or, but sometimes they are like, I had an argument, with my mom, or this and this and this, just to get that out. And then always being aware and always, asking students for consent. We ask as facilitators, do you want to talk more about that? Do you want to hear from other people in the group? Because sometimes youth will be like, I went through that, and they want to share, but always asking do you want to hear that from other people? And then facilitators, if we have anything to offer as well, because all of us are from the LGBTQ plus community, so maybe we've had an experience, as an adult that we can share, but we're always asking. And there can be some really rich conversations that come from that, and then that can lead to providing resources, and we make sure it's youth led. So we're always like, if the students have things they want to offer first, sure. And then adults, we can come from behind and let them know, here's something else, or here's an official resource. If I have a student who's talking about, I'm going to lose my housing, then I can say, well, I know that there's a shelter here that accepts youth. I know there's a place here that you can go. But then there might be friends who are like, you can come stay with me.
Wow.
So always making sure that they have the space to help each other first.
Prioritizing the relationship among and between them. Wow, that's a kind of mentoring, that we were talking about, letting each other be there for each other.
Yeah.
But we were also talking about some of these other resources that some of these youth need, maybe more so than kids in other populations too. Like we were talking about together, right? And just having these overlapping areas where there can be a net built up for kids or youth that might suddenly find themselves outside of the net of a family.
Yeah, so very excited for the Host Homes program to be able to offer that to youth of if you do get kicked out, there's a program that might be able to put you with a family who is said, I would like to house a youth and help take care of them and help, get them where they need to be. Being able to get gender affirming items for youth. We don't have funding to do that ourselves, but Stonewall does. So we ask them, they order it for us for free. And the really great thing is they wrap it up for the student, and then we can take it to them, and that makes a student's day. A student who's like, I need a binder. I would like to bind my chest because I identify as male, and I'm having a lot of dysphoria. That comes up, and I can be the one that's like, hey, guess what? I know how to get you one for free. Wow. Let me know. Fill out this form, and I'll do that. And then bringing it into them that day. Oh my gosh, the happiest. Really? Being able to do that really is another one of those times where I'm like, oh my God, I love my job.
That's one of those moments.
Because they're like, oh my God, I have it. Immediately runs out, puts it on, comes back and is like, wow, I feel so good, So it's being able to do things like that and being able to work with other organizations and just show youth you have a network already of folks who are we are here to support you and get you what you need. That's that's really cool.
Yeah. And in that moment too, the youth can know that they're in a chain of just relationship that's trusted, where you can bring that to them, and it's not like you mentioned cost for an item or whatever, and there's cost, but it feels like it's almost less about cost than having the acceptance of getting it, or someone to help them get it.
Yeah, and be excited about it.
Yeah.
Because that's another thing. A student will come in and, maybe sheepishly say, my name is this now, and I would like to use these pronouns. And everyone's like, yeah, we're so excited. Let's do it, or a student saying oh my gosh, I just talked to my doctor and now I get to start on hormones. And we're all like, yes, like cheering, you know, just really being there and affirming who they are, no matter what stage they're at, and just being like, we all love and support you here, and we're excited for you, because they might not get that anywhere else, you know, or maybe it's just in their very specific friend group. But then you come into a space where like maybe you know some of the people, maybe you don't, and they're all just like, we're so excited for you being who you are.
That's so good.
And sometimes that might change. It's also like we keep kind of coming back to, it's a place where you can just express yourself. So we know that like living and growing as a human being, you change. You know, we're all like flexible. We learn more about ourselves and about the world and how we fit in it over time. And like that's happening a lot when you're a teenager. And so there are some times where like a student is coming in, dressing a certain way, identifying a certain way at the beginning of the year. It's different. Maybe a few months later, and then maybe it's changed again. And we really allow for that in the space, because we know it takes time. And we're here to like help affirm you in any of those ways, because eventually it's going to lead you to the place where you're like, this is who I am. Yeah. And that's like really important for us.
And once, you know, and that is important, like that sense of like being affirmed. And you've described some of these emotional moments of like affirmation. But you and I have also talked about how there's social science behind affirmation too. And it's not, I love those moments and I want those moments. I know there's a deeper, you know, resonance is happening when a good emotional moment happens. But these kids also are living in a world where like the studies, the science shows that like more affirming atmospheres around them reduces these risks of suicidal ideation. They reduce health outcomes for the youth that they're experiencing at different proportions than other populations. So it's all of that at the same time, and that's why it's very frustrating to see like anti-youth legislation, whatever you want to name it, that is against the science of like health.
It's definitely directly correlated as like, this is like suicide prevention and affirming a youth and who they are. Because imagine, you know, someone's telling you, no, everything you think about yourself is a lie. That is not you. I didn't raise you to be that way. And you just end up hating yourself. Of course, that leads you down a path where you might not want to exist, or there's no way to feel good about yourself anymore. So being able to have that, it is there. Yeah, there's lots of studies about how just giving folks access to those resources where they might be able to get affirming care in any kind of way, or just having supportive adults. That's the big thing for youth. Having supportive adults in their life is a major impact, and a major deterrent against suicide and suicidal ideation.
When you started talking about that, you said like you like need to. No, and I was just feeling that, you know, Jay, I needed to tell you like I didn't. That wasn't something that happened to me when I was growing up. No one told me that I should be a different way, or that I didn't have a fear of, you know, expressing myself for who I am. And I just what I'm needing to do in my own life is to learn about the reality of this, you know, and then to try to, and I just so value you sharing, you know, your story and telling the story about youth, so that I can like be responsible for someone who didn't have a kind of affirmed youth, you know?
Yeah, and that's funny, because that's the thing I don't think about. Like from my perspective, I'm like, I did grow up that way, and I've known a lot of people who grew up that way. So it's a little more odd for me. Like, I think we're in the same place of like, you know, the different perspective. But I will say I maybe have seen more of that here in Washington, which I think is probably the main reason why Pizza Klatch can exist, is that there are a lot of adults who are like, wait a second, I think we need to affirm these kids. Let's figure out how to support that happening, which makes it a little easier for us to maybe get funding or talk to the schools about being, you know, can we come into your school and do this? To the point where a lot of the schools realize they need something like Pizza Klatch, and they really are, you know, contacting us and pushing and all of that. And we're like, we don't have enough money to do it though.
Well, there's a little
We'd love to, right?
Yeah.
You know, please.
There's a couple quotes that I read on the website that I just wanted to share. One says, Pizza Klatch makes a difference in my week. Someone is always there to listen. And now that you've described it, like just my mental image of what that is. Like it's someone who's right. It's a peer, with them. I can be who I am here, is what a youth said. Yeah, that's so special. Yeah. Pizza Klatch brings a positive image and hope for the future. And then I now know people who are in the same place as I am.
Yeah.
Yeah. So big themes of solidarity, acceptance, just relationship durability, and
just
community.
knowing you're not alone. You're like, because you've probably spent a lot of time being like, I'm the only person who has these feelings. I'm the only person who thinks this way. And then you get into a space and you're like, wait a second. I would say, like, in our smallest school, you can go into a space and you're like, there's 3 other people in this school who feel the same way I do. And that's major. And I'll say, like, that school specifically is in a rural community where there's, like, less access to resources. And so even that, to be able to be like, okay, I go to this very tiny rural school, but there's at least 3 other people. And then there's 2 adults who take, time out of their day to come here. Excuse me. That's huge.
That is. That is. How can people get involved, or is there a need right now for specific resources, like on a volunteer level or otherwise?
Always. We always need facilitators. We always need money, just funding in general. Pizza is super expensive. And to pay staff to be able to go out and do that work, because staff can also stay after lunch a little bit. The volunteers, they're taking time out of their work day. Most of them, some of our volunteers are, dealing with disability and things like that. So that, it might take a while to get to a school. So we always just need people. And more than that, just like to talk more about what Pizza Klatch is doing and kind of advocate for us as we try to gather more resources and kind of spread out a bit and hopefully be able to provide support to even more students.
What's the scope now, the range for is it Thurston County?
Yeah, Pizza Klatch is in all of the high schools in Thurston County.
It's in all the high schools in Thurston County?
All the public high schools, I'll be very specific. We are talking with some other schools. We're in one middle school as well. And we've had a lot of need to be in more middle schools. So we're working towards that. We're also working towards hopefully getting into Pierce County in the next school year, talking with some middle schools out there because the need is very significant for middle schools. But like I said, the age range that we work with to make it so that it works out with the informed consent and all does make it a little tricky. But that's our goal is to hopefully spread out a little bit more in the next couple of years.
Okay, well, I just hope that vision manifests.
Me too.
Yeah. Thank you. So as we're wrapping up today, I always conclude by asking people how they understand or define hope and where you're seeing hope manifested in the world or expressed today in the world. Oh,
I'm definitely seeing hope, like just within the hearts of the youth, because they've been so active the past couple of years, especially thinking to the uprisings that were happening in the summer of 2019. I was out there a couple of times in the street, and like most of the people out there were young people in high school. One of our local high schools, students were doing walkouts, protesting to get more support for the bullying and harassment and sexual violence that they were experiencing. And so seeing that it's not just talking about it, the students are like, we want action and we're going to do something about it right now. That my hope is really in there because they're so passionate about it at such a young age. I'm hoping that they don't get burnt out. So I'm hoping Pizza Klatch can really support them so that they can keep up that energy for as long as possible. Because I really do think that there's going to be a lot of changes happening as this generation gets older.
So hoping them.
Them.
Great. Well, thank you for the work you do. Thank you for being here today. Really appreciate it.
Of course.
And so we'll conclude there today. Again, this has been Lean In Olympia. It's a podcast of Interfaith Works, and you can check out past episodes on our website. You can also subscribe at Spotify, and you can check out our YouTube channel and Facebook page. So again, Jay Banks, the Executive Director of Pizza Klatch, has been our guest today. And can you say the website? You probably said it 1,000 times. I'll just kind of...
So, pizzaklatch.org. Pizza, everyone knows it, and Klatch, KLATCH.
Okay.
.org.
.org. Great. Well, thank you. And we'll post a link to that too on our website. So thank you for being here today, and be well.